The day Silas Vale paid $43 and his dead brother's pocket watch for a woman, he did not tell himself he was saving her. Men who called themselves saviors usually wanted applause. Silas wanted one thing. He wanted to keep Luther Pike from walking out of Mercy Junction with Mara Harrow before sundown. It happened behind the freight office on a gray November morning, the kind of cold that made horses lower their heads and men pretend their hands were not shaking. Silas had come down from Larkspur Ridge for flour, lamp oil, black powder, and nails. That was all. He had spent 8 years making sure no one in town needed him, missed him, or asked too many questions about what he had done in the war. Then Amos Harrow stepped in front of him. Amos was a narrow man with a drunk's wet eyes and a smile that never reached the rest of his face. His coat was buttoned wrong. His beard had gone yellow around the mouth. He smelled of rye whiskey, old sweat, and desperation. "Vale," Amos said. "You got money." Silas kept walking. "Not for you. You don't even know what I'm selling." "I know enough." Amos followed him across the frozen ruts in the street. $43. Silas stopped. The number was too exact, too hungry. "For what?" he asked. Amos looked over his shoulder toward the freight office, then lowered his voice. "My girl." For a moment, the whole street seemed to lose its sound. The mule wagon creaked past without noise. A dog barked somewhere beyond the livery, but it landed like a memory. Silas turned slowly. "Say that again." "My daughter," Amos said, as if repeating the words made them cleaner. "Mara, 20 years old, strong, good worker, can cook, sew, wash, keep quiet. She's no beauty queen, but she'll do what she's told. $43, and she's yours." Silas hit him so fast, the first blow surprised them both. Amos staggered into the freight wall, one hand clapped over his mouth. Blood ran between his fingers. "You offer me a person again," Silas said, "and I'll bury you behind that office." Amos laughed through the blood. "Then Luther Pike gets her." That name did what the cold could not. It went into Silas's bones. Luther Pike owned half the claims east of Mercy Junction, and all the fear around them. Men disappeared in his camps. Women returned from his company house with eyes that had gone old overnight. Everyone knew it. Nobody said it where Pike's riders could hear. Amos saw the change in Silas's face and pressed on. "I owe Pike $43 by dusk. He said if I can't pay, he'll take Mara to settle it. Said she can work in the cookhouse. We both know what that means." Silas stared at him. "So you decided to beat him to it?" "I decided she might do better with you. You live alone, you got a roof, you got meat hung in winter. Pike will break her. You might only use her." Silas grabbed Amos by the throat and pinned him to the wall. "Listen carefully. I am not buying your daughter." Amos's eyes watered. "Then walk away." Silas did not move. Across the street, Mara Harrow sat on a crate beneath the freight office awning. She wore a faded blue dress patched with brown thread, a man's coat too large for her, and boots with one heel gone crooked. In her lap was a single brass button. She kept turning it over in her fingers, not sewing it, not dropping it, just turning it over and over, as if that little piece of metal was the last thing in the world that still belonged to her. She did not look frightened. That was the worst part. Fear meant a person still believed something might happen. Mara looked finished. Silas saw the shallow hollow in her cheeks, the bruise half hidden under her collar, the cracked skin over her knuckles. He saw the way people passed her without slowing down, not because they did not notice, because noticing would require them to do something. Mara raised her eyes, their gazes met. There was no plea in her face, no bargain, no hope, only a terrible calm, like she had already stepped off the edge and was waiting to feel the ground. Silas let Amos go. "Get her bag." Amos swallowed. "So you'll pay?" "I'll settle the debt. Then you will sign a paper saying she owes you nothing, and you have no claim on her. You will not speak her name again. You will not come near my ridge. And if I hear you sold the story different, I will come down from that mountain and correct it with both hands." Amos licked blood from his lip. $43. Silas reached into his coat and counted the coins into Amos's hand. Then he took out the pocket watch. It had belonged to his younger brother, Tom, who died at Antietam with Silas's hand pressed against the hole in his chest. Silas had carried it for 12 years, and opened it only when the nights were bad. He placed it on top of the coins. "That covers whatever interest you invented." Amos stared at the watch like he'd been handed a holy relic and a curse. Silas dragged him into the freight office, made the clerk write a receipt, made Amos sign it, made 2 witnesses put their names below his. Then Silas folded the paper once and placed it in Mara's hand. "That is yours," he said. "Not mine. Yours." Mara looked at the paper, then at him. "What happens now?" Her voice was quiet. It had no tremble in it. "Now you decide whether you want to come with me." Amos barked a laugh. "Where else is she going to go?" Silas turned his head. Amos stopped laughing. Mara held the receipt with both hands. "If I don't?" "I'll take you to the widow at the church until we find somewhere safe. Or I'll put you on the westbound stage if you want distance. Or I'll leave that money spent and let you tell me to get out of your sight." She studied him, searching for the trick. Men had taught her that every kindness had a hook buried inside it. "What do you want for the money?" "Nothing you're afraid of. Men don't pay $43 in a watch for nothing." "No," Silas said. "Sometimes they pay it because not paying costs more." Mara looked back down at the brass button in her palm. It had left a circular mark pressed into her skin. At last, she stood. "My bag's under the crate." That bag held 1 dress, 1 comb with broken teeth, a tin cup, a needle case, and a little book of hymns that had belonged to her mother. Everything else in her life had either been taken, sold, or outgrown by pain. Silas lifted the bag and tied it to his saddle. "You ride," he said. "I can walk." "I know." That was all he said, and somehow it made her climb into the saddle without arguing. They left Mercy Junction, with the town watching from windows, porches, and the mercantile door. People would talk before the hoofprints dried. Silas could feel their eyes on his back. Mara did not look back once. The trail to Larkspur Ridge climbed through juniper, shale, and pines that hissed in the wind. For the first hour, neither of them spoke. Silas led the horse and watched the ground for ice. Mara sat stiff-backed in the saddle, the receipt folded in her fist. Halfway up, he stopped by a creek. "Drink," he said. Mara slid down, knelt, and cupped water into her mouth like someone stealing from a place that might punish her for it. When she stood, she asked the question again. "What happens at your cabin?" "There's a back room with a latch on the inside. You'll have it. I sleep in the loft. You'll eat what I eat. Work if you want to work. Rest if you need to rest. When the pass clears in spring, I can take you anywhere that road reaches." "You expect me to believe that?" No. That answer made her blink. Silas looked at the creek, not at her. "Belief takes time. I don't require it today." She folded the receipt smaller. "What if I run?" "Then I hope you run towards somewhere better." Mara's mouth tightened, like the words had found a place in her she did not know how to protect. "You're strange," she said. "I've been called worse." They reached the cabin near dusk. It stood under tall pines at the shoulder of the ridge, rough but steady, with smoke-blackened stones around the chimney, and a porch that leaned slightly to the left. A small barn sat downhill. Beyond that, the world fell away into blue valleys and empty sky. Mara stopped at the edge of the clearing. "This is yours?" "Mine, the bank's, and whatever animals think they can chew through the walls." She almost smiled. Almost. Inside, the cabin was warmer than she expected. It smelled of cedar smoke, leather, coffee, and something simmering in a pot. There were 2 chairs, 1 table, shelves of tools, a rifle over the door, and a narrow back room with a bed, a wool blanket, and a window that looked toward the trees. Silas pointed to it. "Yours." Mara stood in the doorway as if she had been shown a room in a palace. "The latch works?" "From inside." "You won't come in?" "Not unless the roof catches fire, or you ask me to." She turned toward him. "You say that like it's easy." "It should be." Her face changed then. Not softness, not trust. Just a small crack in the stone. Silas ladled stew into a bowl and set it on the table. Mara stared at the food. "You can have more," he said. "I haven't finished this." "I know. I mean, when you do." She ate carefully at first, then faster, then with the shame of someone who had learned hunger was something other people could use against her. Silas turned his attention to cleaning his knife and pretended not to see. When the bowl was empty, he filled it again before she could ask. Mara looked at him sharply. "I didn't say I wanted more." "You didn't have to." For a second, he thought she might cry. Instead, she picked up the spoon. That night, after she closed herself in the back room, Silas sat beside the fire with the receipt copy on the table. The paper said Amos Harrow had taken payment in full and released all claim over his daughter. It was a filthy paper, a necessary paper. Silas fed it to the flames. Mara's original stayed with her. At dawn, Silas woke to the sound of sweeping. Mara had already lit the stove, scrubbed the table, stacked the wood, and started washing his shirts in a basin of water so cold it made her fingers red. "You don't have to do all that," he said. She kept scrubbing. "I know." "Then why?" Her hands stopped. "Because if I'm not useful, people change their minds." Silas had no answer ready for that. War had taught him many things. How to sleep through cannon fire. How to tell by the pitch of a bullet whether it had passed close enough to matter. How to carry a friend until the friend's body became just weight. It had not taught him what to say to a woman who thought rest was a debt. So he told the truth. "I won't change my mind because you sat down." Mara looked at him with open disbelief. "People always change their minds." "Then we'll start with this. Eat breakfast before you earn it." "I haven't earned it." "You survived the night. That's enough." She stared at him for a long time. Then she sat. The first weeks were awkward and quiet. Mara moved through the cabin like someone trying not to disturb the air. She apologized when a spoon touched a bowl too loudly. She flinched when Silas dropped firewood. She folded herself smaller whenever he entered a room, even if he came in carrying coffee. Silas learned to announce himself before opening the door. He learned not to stand between her and an exit. He learned that kindness could frighten a person if cruelty had worn a kind face before. And Mara learned small things too. The flour was not locked. The lamp oil was not counted against her. The horse, Brindle, liked apple cores but hated being touched under the jaw. The mountain made different sounds at night than a drunk man stumbling through a hallway. One afternoon, Silas returned from checking traps and found her outside holding the rifle from above the door. It was pointed safely at the ground, but her grip was white-knuckled. "I heard something in the brush," she said. "Fox, likely. I want to learn. To shoot. To not be helpless." That was a different answer. Silas nodded. "Tomorrow." He taught her in a meadow, where the sound would not echo too badly against the cabin. The first shot bruised her shoulder and made her swear under her breath. The second went wide enough to insult the tree they were aiming at. "You're pulling away before the trigger breaks," Silas said. "The gun kicks." "It does. I don't like it." "You don't have to like it. You only have to know it won't own you." Mara breathed in, held, fired. The bullet struck the bark, not the center, but close. She lowered the rifle and stared. "I hit it." "You did." "I hit what I meant to hit. Remember that feeling." She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time there was something alive behind her eyes besides caution. They practiced until snow began to fall. Winter came hard that year. It closed the trail, sealed the creek in glass, and turned the cabin into an island of smoke and lamplight. The world became smaller, and inside that smallness, Mara began to unfold. Not all at once. Healing never came like sunrise in stories. It came like thaw, a drip under the eaves, a green blade under dirty snow, a laugh that escaped before she could stop it. The first time Silas heard that laugh, he had slipped on the porch steps carrying 2 armloads of wood and landed flat on his back in a drift. Mara came running with terror on her face. Then she saw him blinking up through the snow, with kindling scattered around him like a ruined crown. She covered her mouth. "Don't," Silas warned from the ground. "I'm not. You are. I'm not laughing." The sound broke loose anyway, small at first, then helpless, then bright enough to change the room when they went back inside. Silas sat by the stove rubbing his elbow. "Glad my suffering has found a purpose." Mara wiped her eyes. "You looked so offended at the snow." "It attacked me." "It did not." "It waited." She laughed again. Silas decided then that if the mountain asked him for one good reason to stay alive another winter, that sound would do. During storms, Mara read from her mother's hymn book. She stumbled over words she had once known and forgotten after Amos decided books made girls hard to manage. Silas brought out his own books from a trunk. A primer, a book of poems, a weather journal from an old surveyor. Mara touched them like they might vanish. "You teach me?" "If you want." "What if I'm slow?" "Then you'll learn slowly." "What if I can't?" "Then we'll try a different way." She hated the letters at first, hated the way they slid around on the page, hated needing help, hated that her father's voice still lived in her head, calling her stupid every time she made a mistake. One night, she threw the pencil across the cabin. Silas picked it up and set it back in front of her. "Again," he said. "I can't." "You can." "You don't know that." "I know you learned to read tracks in snow in 2 days. I know you can strip and clean a rifle faster than most men in Pike's camps. I know you remember every measurement in the bread recipe after hearing it once." "That isn't the same." "No, this is paper. Paper can be beaten." She looked at the pencil. Then, with fury in her face, she wrote her name. Mara Harrow. Uneven. Crooked. Hers. Spring arrived late. It came with mud, thunder, and the smell of thawed earth. Mara stood beside the south wall of the cabin and stared at the patch of ground where weeds and stones had spent years winning. "I want a garden," she said. Silas leaned on the shovel. "That ground bites back." "So do I." He smiled. Noticed. They worked the soil for 9 days, dug stones, turned clay, built a fence. Mara's hands blistered, split, and hardened. She planted potatoes, onions, beans, and 3 rows of herbs with the seriousness of someone making a treaty with the future. "What if nothing grows?" she asked after the seeds were buried. "Then we plant again." "That easy?" "No, but simple things aren't always easy." She looked across the little garden, then at the cabin. "I keep waiting for this to be taken away." "I know." "When does that stop?" Silas thought of the war, of waking in the loft with his hand reaching for a pistol that was no longer under his pillow. Maybe it doesn't stop all at once. Maybe one day you notice you waited an hour instead of every minute. Then half a day. Then a week. Mara pressed one palm over the new dirt. "I want a week." "Then we'll start with tomorrow." The garden grew. So did the thing between them. It lived first in the ordinary places, in the way Silas saved her the heel of the bread because she liked it best, in the way Mara mended the tear in his coat before he noticed it. in the way they stopped saying the cabin and started saying home. One summer evening, Mara found Silas on the porch cleaning his old revolver. "Do you ever miss people?" she asked. "I used to think I didn't. And now?" "Now I think I was not tired of people. I was tired of being known wrong." She sat beside him. "How do I know you won't become someone else?" He set the revolver down, slowly, where she could see both his hands. "You don't." That answer hurt, but it was honest enough to stay with. Silas continued. "You watch. You take your time. You believe patterns, not promises. And if my pattern ever turns cruel, you leave before my words can talk you out of what you know." Mara's eyes filled. "You'd let me leave?" "I'd saddle Brindle myself." "What if I don't want to?" His voice became quieter. "Then I would be grateful for the day." For a long time they sat without touching. Then Mara reached over and placed her hand on his. Not because she owed it, not because she was cornered, because she wanted to. Silas did not move until her fingers settled. That was the first kind of love they learned, the kind that asks permission, even from silence. By August, Mercy Junction had decided what story it preferred. Some said Silas Vale had bought himself a mountain wife. Some said Mara had bewitched him. Some said Amos Harrow had made a regrettable choice under pressure and deserved forgiveness from a daughter who had forgotten her place. Mara heard none of it until the day she chose to ride into town. Silas did not suggest it. He did not forbid it. He only asked, "Are you sure?" "No," Mara said, "but I'm going." Mercy Junction looked smaller than it had in November. The freight office awning still sagged. The mercantile bell still cracked when the door opened. Men still turned when she passed. But Mara was not sitting on a crate anymore. She was walking. Miss Rourke at the mercantile stared at her. "Mara Harrow?" Mara lifted her chin. "Mara is enough." The old woman looked her over, seeing the clean dress, the steady eyes, the rifle scabbard on Silas's saddle outside. "Well," Mrs. Rourke said softly, "you look fed." It was not elegant. It was not enough, but it was the first kind thing that woman had ever managed to say to her. Mara bought thread, coffee, seed paper, and a slate for lessons. She paid with coins from the money she had earned selling dried herbs to a peddler. When she stepped back into the street, Amos Harrow stood outside the saloon. He had aged 10 years in 10 months. His face had caved in around the mouth. His coat hung off him like it belonged to a larger, better man. "Mara," he said. Silas's hand moved toward his holster. Mara touched his wrist. "No." She crossed the street alone. Amos looked almost relieved. "Girl, I've been meaning to." "You don't get to call me that." His mouth closed. "You sold me," she said. "You signed the paper. You took the money. Whatever you think you want from me now, the answer is no." "I'm your father." "No." "You're the man who made me learn how to survive a father." People had stopped pretending not to listen. Amos's face twisted with humiliation. "You think Vale loves you? He paid for you." Men don't pay unless they expect use. Mara felt the old fear rise. Then she felt something stronger rise under it. "He paid so I could choose," she said. "That is why you hate him. Because you never gave me one." She walked back to Silas without running. Only when they were past the last building did her hands begin to shake. Silas did not tell her she was fine. He did not say it was over. He only said, "You stood." Mara closed her eyes. "I stood." That day changed the town in ways neither of them saw at first. 2 weeks later, a woman named Ada Quill came to the cabin after dark, with one eye swollen shut and a boy of 6 asleep in her arms. Her husband worked Pike's East claim. He had broken 2 of her fingers for hiding bread for the child. "I heard," Ada whispered, "that you got out." Mara looked at Silas. Then she opened the door wider. Ada stayed 4 nights. Silas rode her and the boy to her sister's farm beyond Clearwater. Mara sent them with dried beans, a blanket, and the slate she had bought for herself. "I can get another," she said when Silas noticed. Within a month, another woman came. Then another. Not all stayed, not all escaped clean. Some returned to the men who hurt them, because fear is a chain with many locks, and hunger holds the key to some of them. But the cabin became a place people whispered about. A lamp in the high trees. A door that opened. A woman on the porch with a rifle. And kind eyes. Mara changed again. She still had days when a slammed cupboard made her stomach fold in on itself. She still woke from dreams of Amos calling her name. She still sometimes touched the brass button she had carried from the freight office, turning it between her fingers until the past loosened its grip. But she no longer mistook fear for truth. One evening, after helping a girl barely 17 write her first letter to an aunt in Kansas, Mara sat by the fire and stared at her own hands. "What is it?" Silas asked. "I thought surviving meant getting away." "It can. But it isn't the end." "No." She looked up. "Surviving is what you do until you learn what living is for." Silas smiled faintly. "And what is yours for?" Mara glanced toward the back room, where the girl slept under 3 quilts, safe for the first time in months. "This." Trouble arrived with the first hard frost. Luther Pike did not come himself. Men like Pike sent weather ahead of them. 3 riders appeared at the edge of the clearing while Silas was splitting wood, and Mara was hanging herbs from the porch beam. The man in front wore a black hat with a silver band and carried himself like the world owed him apology. His name was Bram Sutter, Pike's foreman. Behind him rode Amos Harrow. Mara's fingers closed around the herb twine. Silas set the axe down. Sutter smiled at the cabin, the garden, the stacked wood, the little line of laundry snapping in the wind. "Pretty place," he said. "Shame if it got a reputation." "It already has one," Mara said. "Not the kind I mean." Amos would not meet her eyes. Sutter looked at Silas. "Mr. Pike is tired of his workers losing wives, daughters, cooks, and useful women to this ridge. He says you are interfering with contracts." "Women aren't contracts," Silas said. "Depends who writes the paper." Mara stepped down from the porch. "I have a paper," she said. A receipt my father signed when he sold every claim he thought he had over me. Shall we ask the town how proud he is of that signature?" Amos flinched. Sutter's smile thinned. "Bold thing, aren't you?" "No," Mara said. "Just finished being quiet." The rider to Sutter's left shifted his horse forward. Silas reached for the rifle, leaning against the stump. Mara was faster. She drew, aimed at the tin cup hanging from the fence post behind Sutter, and fired. The Dep jumped from the nail and spun into the dirt. All three horses startled. Mara kept the rifle level. "The next shot doesn't need a cup." Sutter stared at her with new calculation. Then he laughed once, not because anything was funny, but because men like him hated being seen afraid. "This isn't over." Mara lowered the rifle an inch. "Men keep saying that to me, yet they keep leaving." The riders turned back down the trail. Amos lingered. For one heartbeat, he looked like he might speak. Mara shook her head. "Don't." He rode after them. The silence that followed was not peace. It was the silence before a match struck. They prepared. Silas set bell wires through the lower trees. Mara stored water buckets near the porch. They moved the woodpile away from the cabin wall and cleared dry brush from the slope. Mrs. Rourke, who had finally chosen a side, sent word that Pike had been drinking and promising to teach the Ridge a lesson. Mara slept with the rifle within reach. The attack came before dawn, not with riders shouting, not with threats, with smoke. Mara woke to the smell and was out of bed before she understood why. The barn was burning. Flames climbed the side wall in orange sheets. Brindle screamed from the corral, kicking against the gate. Silas ran for the horse while Mara grabbed the water pails. Then she saw Amos. He stood beyond the garden fence with a torch in one hand, and tears shining on his drunk, ruined face. "You made me nothing," he shouted. Mara froze with one empty bucket in her hand. "I was your father," Amos said. "I was owed respect." The barn roof cracked. Silas shouted for her to get back, but Mara could not move. Not because she was helpless, because at last she saw him clearly. Not as a giant, not as fate, not as the voice of God in a dark hallway. Just a small, mean man holding fire. Because control was the only language he had ever learned. "You were owed nothing, you beat out of me," she said. Amos threw the torch toward the porch. Mara raised the rifle. Her first shot hit the torch midair and knocked it into the mud. Her second shot struck the ground at Amos's feet. "I said, run." He stared at her, shocked, sober. "I said, run." He ran. Silas got Brindle loose and beat the barn fire down with wet blankets and dirt before it reached the hay stores. By sunrise, the barn was half gone, the garden fence scorched, and Mara's hands were blistered from carrying water. A posse from town arrived 2 hours later, with Marshal Truett Kane at the front. Behind him came Mrs. Rourke, Ada Quill, 2 miners, a carpenter, and half the people who had once watched Mara sit on that freight crate without helping. Kane listened to Silas, then to Mara. When she finished, he removed his hat. "I should have done more a year ago," he said. Mara was too tired to soften it for him. "Yes," she said. "You should have." He nodded. "Then I'll do more now."
They found Amos hiding in a dry wash by noon. Bram Sutter was arrested 2 days later, after one of his own riders admitted Pike had paid for the fire. Luther Pike himself did not fall that week. Men with money rarely fall quickly. But the first crack ran through him then, and cracks matter. The town helped rebuild the barn. No one announced it. No one made speeches. They came with lumber, tools, nails, coffee, bread, and shame they did not know how to name. Mara accepted the help. That was harder than giving it. When the new barn wall went up, Silas carved a small mark into the center beam. A mountain, a flame, and a brass button. Mara ran her fingers over it. "For remembering?" she asked. "For knowing what it cost." Winter returned, but the cabin did not shrink the way it had before. It grew. A second bed was built into the back room, then a third. The loft was widened. A cellar was dug deeper for supplies. Mrs. Rourke began sending women quietly, with sacks of flour hidden under bolts of cloth. Marshal Kane started looking the other way, in the right direction, which was the first useful thing some lawmen ever learned. In January, Silas asked Mara to marry him while they were repairing a broken window shutter, in a wind so cold it stole the breath from their mouths. Mara looked at him over the hammer. "You're asking me now?" "You said decisions shouldn't wait for perfect weather." "I was talking about planting onions." "I applied it broadly." She laughed so hard she dropped the nails. Then she became serious. "I won't be owned." Silas's face changed. "Never." "I won't promise obedience." "I wouldn't know what to do with it." "I keep my name until I decide otherwise." "I love your name because it belongs to you." She held his gaze. "Then yes." They married in the schoolhouse because the church roof leaked and the school had more benches. Ada Quill stood beside Mara. Marshal Kane signed the paper. Mrs. Rourke cried into a handkerchief and denied it to anyone who glanced at her. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, the whole room seemed to inhale. No one spoke. Mara did not take Silas's name that day. She took his hand. That was enough. By spring, the ridge had a name. The women named it first. Button Light. Because Mara hung the old brass button above the cabin door on a strip of blue thread, and when the lantern burned behind it at night, the button caught the glow like a small, stubborn moon. Button Light Ridge became a place passed from mouth to mouth across stage stops, wash lines, church basements, and mining camps. If he breaks your bones, go to Button Light. If your father sells your wages, go to Button Light. If you have nowhere, follow the North Trail until you see the lamp. Mara never pretended they saved everyone. They didn't. Some women arrived too late. Some left before they were ready. Some went back. Some disappeared into towns that did not write down women's names, unless there was a marriage, a crime, or a grave. Each loss marked Mara. Silas would find her sometimes behind the barn, crying with one hand over her mouth so she would not wake the others. He never told her to stop. He sat in the dirt beside her until the wave passed. "I thought being strong meant it hurt less," she said one night. "No," Silas said.
I think being strong means you let it hurt, and keep your heart alive anyway. She leaned against him. That sounds exhausting. It is. Then why do it? He looked toward the cabin, where lamplight glowed behind the curtains Mara had sewn from flour sacks and blue calico. Because the alternative is becoming like them. The following summer, Luther Pike's company broke apart. Not because one hero rode in and ended him. Because women kept leaving. Because miners started talking.
Because Marshal Kane finally sent statements to the territorial judge. Because Mrs. Rourke stopped extending credit to Pike's men. Because Bram Sutter, facing prison, decided loyalty was worth less than a lighter sentence. Because small acts, stacked high enough, become a wall. Pike left Mercy Junction in disgrace, cursing the ridge all the way to the county line. Mara watched him go from the mercantile porch, with Ada on one side and Silas on the other. She felt no triumph, only space. The kind of space a person feels when a chain falls off, and the skin underneath has not yet learned wind. Years passed. The cabin became 2 cabins, then a long room for meals, then a school table where Mara taught letters to women who'd been told their minds were useless. The garden became terraces down the slope. The barn held 3 horses, 2 milk goats, and a flock of chickens that terrorized everyone except Mara. Silas's hair silvered at the temples. Mara's hands grew strong and scarred. The brass button above the door darkened with weather, but never fell. On quiet evenings, when the ridge was full of ordinary sounds, children reciting sums, goats complaining, soup bubbling, a hammer tapping in the shed, Mara would sometimes take out the receipt Amos had signed. She kept it folded in her mother's hymn book, not because it had freed her. A paper could not do that. Silas had not freed her either, not really. He had opened a door. She had walked through it. And every day after, she had walked farther. On the anniversary of the day in Mercy Junction, Mara and Silas stood at the edge of the ridge and looked down toward the town lights. "Do you ever wish you hadn't stopped that morning?" she asked. Silas did not pretend to misunderstand. "I wish the world had not made stopping necessary." "That isn't what I asked." He took her hand. "No, I don't wish it, not for one breath. That day brought you to my door, and you turned my hiding place into a home." Mara leaned into him. "You gave me a room with a latch. You made it a refuge." Below them, the town bell rang once. Above them, the first stars came out, hard and bright in the mountain dark. Mara thought of the girl on the freight crate, turning a brass button in her palm, too tired to hope and too numb to pray. She wished she could kneel in front of that girl and tell her what was coming. Not that it would be easy. Not that love would erase the past. Not that courage would make fear disappear. Only this: one day you will stand at the door of your own life, and no one who hurt you will hold the key. One day you will become the person you needed. One day the thing they used to price you will hang above a doorway, as proof that you were never merchandise. You were the maker of the light. Silas squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking?" Mara looked back at Buttonlight Ridge,
at the glowing windows, the women laughing in the yard, the children chasing chickens through the dust, the whole impossible life growing where fear had once planted nothing.
"I'm thinking," she said, "that a cruel world hates nothing more than people who refuse to pass the cruelty on." Silas smiled. "Then we'd better keep refusing." They stood there until the cold drove them inside. Behind them, the brass button caught the lantern light. Small, scarred, unbroken, and bright enough to guide the next lost soul home.